Hello and welcome. Let's talk about reading for school. Have you ever had that feeling where you're just moving your eyes across a page, but nothing's really sinking in? Well, in this explainer, we're going to look at a way to change that, to turn reading from a passive chore into a really powerful thinking tool.
So think about where you are in the semester right now. For a lot of us, a certain pattern starts to creep in. You open your textbook, you look at the assignment, and it just feels different. It feels harder than it did back at the start of the year. Maybe the reading just feels heavier, like you're trying to walk through mud. Or maybe your focus just disappears way faster than it used to. You find yourself reading the same sentence 2, 3, 4 times, and even then, you're not totally sure what it said. If any of this sounds familiar, you are absolutely in the right place. And the good news is, this isn't about just trying harder. It's about having a smarter system.
Okay, so let's get into it. The first big idea we really need to wrap our heads around is this. Reading, especially the kind we do for school, is a thinking task. But what does that actually mean in practice? This right here is the whole key. See, there's a huge difference between just letting your eyes slide over the words and actually doing the work in your brain to make sense of those words. If your eyes are moving, but your brain isn't actively engaged, you might feel like you're reading, but almost nothing is going to stick.
So what does this thinking look like? Well, as you're reading, your brain is supposed to be doing a few jobs. It's deciding what's important, it's connecting new information to stuff you already know, it's flagging things that are confusing, and it's holding on to the key details. The bottom line is, real reading isn't passive. It's an active process of making sense of things.
So to help our brains do all that hard work, we're going to use a simple, two-part strategy. It's called the preview question method. And I want you to think of it like this. Previewing gives your brain a map, and questioning gives your brain a mission. Let's break down that first part, the map.
Previewing is exactly what it sounds like. It's a quick, strategic scan you do before you actually start reading word for word. The goal isn't to understand everything just yet. You're just getting the lay of the land, creating that mental map of what's coming up.
And what are you looking for? It's really simple stuff. You look at the title and any headings or subheadings. You let your eyes catch any bold or italic words. The author put them there for a reason. You glance at any charts or pictures, and a really good habit is to read the first paragraph and the last paragraph. That's it. That's your map.
Now, you might be wondering, why does this even matter? Well, it all comes down to a concept called cognitive load. That's just a fancy term for the total amount of mental horsepower your brain is using at any given moment. And when you jump into a really complex text completely cold, that load is super, super high. And this is why that map is so helpful. Trying to read a dense chapter without previewing is kind of like being dropped in the middle of a new city without a map. Your brain is using all its energy just trying to figure out where it is. But when you preview, you start with a map. That frees up your brain to spend less energy just getting oriented and way more energy actually understanding the ideas. Okay, so that was the map. Now for the mission. And that's where questions come in. This is such a cool idea. When you give your brain a question before you start reading, it's like you're turning on a highlighter in your mind. Your brain now has a specific job to do. It's not just watching words go by, it's actively searching for an answer. And that is a total game changer for your focus.
So what are some good questions? Well, they could be things like, what's the main problem this section is trying to explain? Or what are the key causes and effects being described here? The idea is simple. Giving your brain something specific to look for keeps it on track, hunting for the important stuff instead of just drifting away.
Now, it's really important to realize that not all reading is created equal. There's low-load reading, that's the easy stuff, the lighter mental work. Think of an interesting story or a topic you already know a lot about. But then there's high-load reading, that's the heavy stuff. Dense textbooks, really complex new ideas. This preview question method is absolutely essential for that high-load reading. That's when your brain needs the most support.
So let's make this personal for a second. Think about your own classes. What's an example of low-load reading for you? And more importantly, what's a high-load reading task that you have? Maybe it's your chemistry textbook or an article for your history class. Just being able to tell the difference is a huge first step.
All right, so we've talked about the theory. Now, let's get practical. How do you actually use this method with your own schoolwork? Here's a simple three-step plan to get you started. First, just pick a class, the one where the reading feels the heaviest. Second, imagine you have a new chapter to read. What 3 things would you look for in your preview? Maybe the headings, the diagrams, the summary at the end? And then you do step 3, which is where you create your mission. You turn what you saw in your preview into actual questions.
So, if you saw a heading in your history book called The Causes of the Civil War, your question is obvious, right? What were the main causes of the Civil War? You're creating that mission for your brain before you start the heavy lifting of reading.
And I want you to think about this for a second. How does having a question like that change what your brain actually pays attention to? See, without it, your brain doesn't know what's important. It treats every sentence the same. But with a question, you've given it a filter. It starts actively searching for the key pieces of information it needs to answer that question. So let's just pause and reflect on this. Think about that one class, that one subject, where reading just feels like a chore right now. How could spending just 2 minutes on this preview question method make a difference for you this week? Seriously, it could be as simple as deciding, okay, before I read my next biology chapter, I'm going to preview the headings and turn 2 of them into questions.
Okay, let's wrap this up and make sure these ideas really stick. This whole method is about putting you in the driver's seat of your reading, so it doesn't just drain your energy.
So if you remember anything, remember this. Reading is an active thinking task, not a passive one. Previewing is how you give your brain a map, which lowers that cognitive load. Questions are how you give your brain a mission, which keeps it focused. And this whole system is your secret weapon for that really difficult, high-load reading.
So what's next? Well, now it's time to actually go and finish up the Lesson 9.1 page in your workbook. And when we come back, we're going to build on this with Lesson 9.2, where we'll talk about active reading and being aware of your energy. Thanks for watching.